Wait, I want to do something before we do this. Barry, you think people will be upset if I play some sound clips of you before the show?
Nah, it ain't gonna happen.
All right, good. They won't mind. Barry, did you listen to Ralph Rivera's podcast recently? What did you think of that show?
And they were cussing up a storm. Profanities left, profanities right. Every second word was a hef word.
Brian, you hear how he says hef?
I did indeed hear that.
Like H-E-F.
Every second word was a hef word.
So it's time to go. This is session number 32 of the Podcast Engineering Show. This is going to be good. You know, I never grunt as much as the Profit First podcast. If you ever want to hear people grunting at the beginning of a show, check out the Profit First podcast. I'm one of the co-hosts there, and me and Mike Michalowicz, every time we start, it's just grunting. And we encourage our guests to grunt as well. Grunt along with us. It's pretty funny. So welcome. You've landed here on the Podcast Engineering Show. Not sure how. My name's Chris Curran. I'm an audio engineer. I produce podcasts for Forbes and Dun & Bradstreet, as well as select business authors. And each week on this show, we talk about the audio engineering side to podcasting. We're not getting into marketing and listeners and anything else besides the hardcore audio engineering side. Because when I entered podcasting about 4 years ago, I realized that a lot of podcasters, most podcasters, don't have any experience with audio. They have a little, just by trial and error, but no formal training, no formal experience. And so there's a lot that I can share about, making things sound good that can really help you and really speed up your production as well. Of course, Barry's with me.
Yeah, oh yeah.
He loves it here. And by the way, if you're into medical education or if you know someone who's podcasting in the medical education space, I'm actually going to be keynoting at the podcasting course, which is in April in Kentucky, April 21st to 22nd in 2017. It's going to be this awesome event. They asked me to speak. I'm going to speak, and I'm going to bring it. But it's awesome. So it's for podcasters in medical education. It is thepodcastingcourse.com. This show is brought to you by Podcast Engineering School. It's a school I'm starting to teach all kinds of EQ, compression, mastering, editing, all the hardcore parts of podcast engineering. Because guess what? There's a lot of jobs opening up for podcast engineers and producers. And a lot of people want to start their own business as a podcast producer. It's needed. It's a burgeoning... What's the word, Brian? It's a.
I was zoning out. I'm sorry.
It's a burgeoning industry, podcasting.
Yes.
I think I dozed off or something.
That's right. Podcast engineering is gonna be something. So
it already is something.
It already is something. Geez, you and I are already doing it, Brian. And Barry, what is someone going to need to break into the podcast engineering space?
You're going to need a couple of horses or a couple of mules.
Okay, is that it?
Saws, hammers.
Maybe some fat
nails.
back. I don't know.
Barry, what'd you have for breakfast?
Beans, coffee, and biscuit. And a little piece of fat back.
That's my favorite. So today, you know the drill on the show. I have on a podcaster and or podcast producer. Today we have all the above in Brian Adoff. He's the owner of Riveting FM. If you go to riveting.fm, that's the website. And he's also the producer of a show called Drink, Drank, Drunk, which his wife and her friend host. Is it her friend or your friend?
Mutual friends.
Mutual friend. All right. So Drink, Drank, Drunk. And you also produce different types of audio and shows for clients as well. One of them upcoming is called Unlocked, right?
Yes. Big one coming up.
Yeah. So where are you, Brian?
I am in lovely Philadelphia.
Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love, the city of Rocky Balboa.
That's right. I will say, though, before we get started, that I think you did give a very effective plug for the Profit First podcast. But for those listening, once you get past the first 10 minutes of grunts, there actually is good advice on that show. Chris fails to mention what the show is actually about, but it's a great podcast.
Oh, you've heard that one too, huh?
Yeah, I actually knew of Mike before from his books, and I was like, oh, and I put together you and him, and I went, oh, interesting.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so I've been a fan for a while.
That is a good show. I mean, it's all about profit. It's so funny that, we know in life that what you focus on expands, what you put your energy into grows, and it's the same thing with business. What's the number one thing with business? It's profit. Doesn't matter your revenue. You could bring in $1 million, but if your expenses are $2 million, you're hosed.
That's right. But that's not what this show's about. But for listeners, if you're a fan of Chris's humor and excitement, check out that show because there's 2 of them.
All right, a lot of plugging going on here. So look, we're gonna go through you produce a lot of podcasts, so we're going to talk about your setup and your workflow and your equipment. Yeah. And we're going to start with the speed round. By the way, what's just random question? What's the favorite thing about your website, riveting.fm?
My favorite thing about it?
Yeah.
It's very clean design.
All right.
Fan of the design. I don't know.
Cool, I like it. So let's go through the speed round here. Tell us about give us the quick overview. You're about to produce a show, record a show, and then edit it and mix it and get it out.
Okay.
Take us through the whole process. Just talk about your equipment and workflow from a high level, and then we'll go through it.
Sure. As I was telling you, so I have different shows. The one, which is a branded podcast, is more of a narrative style with lots of music and sound design and highly produced. But then the other show, which is probably more applicable to your audience, is the conversational style show. What's unique and one of my big challenges, I know you talked about this on past episodes, was recording 3, sometimes 4 people in the same room. Right. And I know a lot of people struggle with that. I did in the beginning of getting, the bleed and getting it right. And so I'm happy to talk about that. So I'll talk about that show, which is Drink, Drank, Drunk, which is drunkwordnerds.com, if anyone wants to check that out.
Whoa.
So high level, I'm recording that in Audition, going straight into Audition. It's three microphones in a fairly well sound-treated room, which was key to getting it to sound good. That's probably one of the biggest things that I spent time and effort on. So recording into there, all 3 tracks, multi-track in Audition. Then after that, I edit the content in Audition. So I'll cut, splice the segments. I mean, it's a fairly typical show. There's intro music, there's an outro. We have a couple of bumpers in between the segments. Sometimes we'll record a 2 episodes in one night. The girls do drink during the show. It's a grammar show with a drinking problem.
Oh my.
So we found out that second episode sometimes was a little rough. So we cut that because they're wasted and
oh wow,
yeah, a lot of great grammar tips when you're very drunk.
Here's how to properly slur a word.
So I'll do the editing right after, right when I record it. Cutting out the segments. I'm pretty OCD, but I'm getting fast at it. So I'll take out some bad Lipsmacks. That's probably one of the best things about Audition. I know other people have said this, is the waveform editor. So it's so easy to go into there, and I have a shortcut. So I'll just, if I see that, I'll highlight it. I hit F, it's gone.
Nice.
Save all those tracks. I also have another shortcut, so keyboard shortcuts are really important. I think people should try and learn them and set up their own. So what I'll do is I'll segment it. I'll ripple delete, which will then push it all together. Then I hit S, so that's my shortcut for silence, and it's set up for 6 seconds. So I hit S, enter, and it, boom, puts 6 seconds in. So then I'll copy and paste those 3 tracks and put it into another Audition file, which is my template, my wrapper, which has the bumper music in, and I have that 6 seconds is where the bumper music fits in. So then I bring it all into there, all the raw audio. I tried a few different things, but I found out this is just the one that works best. I tried doing a multi-channel wave file, so with 3 channels, which you can do, but it's a CPU hog, and try to do the processing on that. But I found this is the best way, this is the easiest. So I do all the processing on the multi-track.
Wait,
so
hold on a second. Hold on.
We're going too fast?
No. You can. I didn't know what you said about the 3-channel wave file.
Yeah,
so normally,
I didn't know about this either.
Yeah, so normally a wave file, obviously stereo is the standard stereo file of a wave file. Of course, you can have a mono wave file as well, and you can have stereo and mono MP3 files as well. Are you telling me that you can have a wave file with 3 tracks?
Yes, you can, and you take your 3 mono tracks.
Wait, but how would any playback? How would that be played back?
It works. So I think it's using. I tried it a while ago. So it's using the tenets of the 5.1 surround sound. Now Audition, you can't do it. Actually, I had to use Audacity. You can export to a multi-channel WAV file. But what allows you to do is edit 3 tracks or as many tracks as you want, really.
Right.
In that waveform editor. So it's really good to do that. And actually, can I give a shout out to another podcasting show?
Of course.
Toby Lyle, who, if you don't know him, I think he was at Podcast Movement 2, which I was not at, from 24 Sound. He has started a podcast too about that, but he's a podcast producer, just like you. I worked with him, and he hooked me up, and he does this, but he does mostly for 2 people. So he's the one that turned me on to that, and I tried it, and I was like, dude, I can't do this. It was such a pain. It didn't work, and it was more trouble than it's worth. But it's great being able to like edit out those Lipsmacks and all this stuff you could do in the waveform on all 3 tracks at the same time. But like I said, more trouble than it was worth for me. So don't do it. But if you are doing just 2 voices, it is interesting to try that because you can edit a lot quicker, and that's what he recommended. And that's what he does. So getting back. So now I'm in my the template, right, the final version, and I'll do all my processing on those tracks. So it's not destructive, and I have those all preset. So I'm pretty good. I have it set now. I'll tweak a little bit of the settings based on what it sounds like tonight or that day. Then there's that. So I do the EQ. 3 tracks for the vocals. Like the one I just recorded had 4. I had a guest, so we had 4 microphones. I bus all that to a vocal track. So on that vocal track, I'll put on a loudness meter. This is why Audition's great, is because it has that built-in loudness meter, which I use pretty religiously, so that I have all the files are going to that -16 LUFS, which is the podcasting standard. So I have that. Then that bus track, like I said, I have that loudness meter. I'll put the tiniest bit of reverb on that track, so it hits all the vocals, and I have a limiter on that. And then I mix that down to a WAV file. Sometimes I'll drag that file into Match Loudness, which is another thing Audition has, and from that file it'll tell you what the loudness is,
right?
And I could change it from there. And it's kind of that loud. And like at one point, all the vocals were just kind of harsh. So even on that last final version, I could put like a little tiny bit of EQ to try and take that out, and then that's it. Then I export it to MP3.
Nice. And what MP3 do you? Is it stereo or mono?
I'm doing mono still. Because it's all voices. I mean, the music is it's not that necessary for it. I mean, that was just kind of the safe space in the beginning, and I haven't changed my settings yet to go to stereo. But I might. My other show is all in stereo because of all the sound design.
Oh, okay, right. It needs the spectrum. Wow, that's awesome. This is so cool. I can't wait to step through this whole thing.
Yeah, and just to put it out there for everyone, I didn't know how to do any of this stuff not even a year ago. So, I mean, I started and I learned it all. I learned how to podcast by listening to podcasts about podcasting. I mean, it's really how I learned all of it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And then a lot of effort, though. Don't leave that out. I mean, you had to go a lot of trial and error. And
yeah, exactly.
I know even for a few months before we're talking now, I mean, we emailed back and forth a bunch of times. And you actually had some interesting comments about the school and the courses I'm going to offer. So thank you for thanks for your input on that. I'm still putting those together. Anyway, I'm having trouble. Anyway, not trouble, but
we understand, Chris.
It's kind of like being a perfectionist, and like if you're going to make a course, here's the thing about making a course. If you're going to make a course, in my mind, you should make it so good that everyone who takes the course says, my God, this is awesome. Everyone I know needs to take this course. But then that's a lot of pressure. How are you going to make that course that good? Anyway, that's where I am. Little sneak peek there. All right, so let's go let's go back to your recording. Normally it's 3 mics. What kind of mics?
So I have all SM7Bs. That was a big deal. One of my issues in the beginning when I same room, but it was not treated, and I had different mics. So matching the mics definitely helped. I think I don't sound good at all in the SM7B. I would love to try some other mics on my voice personally. So I don't like that. But that's one of those things, as you know, it's tough to try out mics. But the other mics sound great for the other people that I record.
Now with the
my voice.
Okay, with the SM7Bs, it comes with this big, huge, fat pop filter, which actually, when I used an SM7B, I didn't use that big, monstrous pop filter because it has a little foam on it already, and if you actually speak directly into it, it actually won't pop. So do you use that big, huge thing?
I did it first because that's the close one, and that's what I was like, oh, that sounds perfect for what I'm doing. But then I was advised to take that off, especially for female voices, because it cuts the high end out a little bit. So now I have everyone back on just the normal windscreen that comes with it.
Right. And so what about the SM7B don't you like on your voice?
I sound too bassy, I guess. And this is where I'm much better and more knowledgeable than I was, but it's still I understand how to EQ vocals a little better, but as you know, it's just that it helps if you worked in a studio for a bunch of years, right? And pick it up. So I'm still trying to get my ear as to what's wrong. I'm at the point now where I was like, oh, this doesn't sound good. Okay. And I have like an inkling of why, and I can get it to sound pretty good. I just know it just doesn't sound great on my voice.
Well, one thing about the SM7B, it does have two switches. One of them is a low cut, which a lot of mics have a low cut switch. It also has a presence boost.
Yeah.
As well. So you can, mess around with them. You probably have. Or else, you just treat it later. But I recently switched to the RE20 because I did want to change, and I didn't love the SM7B. It's clear, it's a good mic. I mean, it's a quality mic, but anyway, I went to the RE20. I also have this big, huge condenser mic. It's like a knockoff of an original's like C12, but it's a condenser, and it sounds like really awesome, but I don't think my space is soundproof enough to use it.
Yeah. Here's my challenge also. If I wanted a better mic for my voice for the show I record, then I'm not using matched mics again. And that's kind of where I ran into some issues, I think, in the room. So it's not that big of a deal. And then, but I do record voiceover stuff, and I am using that mic. So it's still the best mic I have right now. And it's fine when I'm very controlled and I can do enough work on it. But I would like to try a different mic. Yeah,
and that's interesting. I was just thinking that if you want, maybe you could send me like a raw, like an unprocessed recording of you talking into the SM7B, and maybe I can mess with it and EQ it and compress. I'll process it the way I can, and then send it back to you. Maybe you could see how it sounds, and then
that'd be great. I love free work.
Yeah, because then like if you know kind of what frequencies I cut and all that, like.
Yeah,
you could,
And for your school, I feel like that's one of those things. Like, I think it is hard to teach right away, but that's where I think amateurs, like myself, need that kind of training. Okay, I get it. I have all the plugins. I kind of get what they do, but it's training your ear. And I did go to music school a long time ago, so I had somewhat of a background in this, but. It's a long time ago.
Yeah, well, no, that'll help, though. That'll actually help a lot. And it does help. It's already helping. Not that it will help. All right, so you got the 3 mics into Audition. Yeah. Do you do any processing or compressing to tape?
No. Good question. Okay. So I'm running through... Wait, is this part of this speed round, or is this the...
No, we're out of the speed round.
Okay. So yeah, I have the 3 mics. 2 of them they're all going into the Focusrite Scarlett 18i8, which is one of the very popular interfaces I know a lot of your listeners use. They're all going into that. 2 of them are going into a Cloudlifter, and then the third one is going into the DBX 286S, also another popular piece of equipment. I'm just using that though specifically for the preamp, so I bypass all the processing. I bought that just to try it out, and it's cheaper than the Cloudlifter. It was like maybe $20 cheaper. So those are my 3 clean preamps going into the Focusrite. Obviously, I'm backing up as all of your listeners do, right? So I back it up to the Zoom H4 coming out of the Focusrite, and then the rest goes straight into Audition.
I'm taking all kinds of good notes here, man. I need this for the show notes.
I pretty much bought everything that everyone talks about.
That's good, though. I mean,
Yeah.
look, that's it should go without saying. But here's the mistake many podcasters make. They try to go cheap, and it just never works. You never feel good about that. And time goes by, you get frustrated, and then you say, you know what? I'm just going to spend the money and buy something decent. And then it's like, wow, I should have done that from the beginning. So, I mean, look, if you don't have the money, I get it. If you have to save and wait, okay, do what you got to do for sure. But, as far as like plugins and fancy processing and all like the zillion things you could do in post, good equipment on the front end just makes most of that irrelevant.
And sound treatment, that was a tough one. I mean, I know the tiniest bit about that. Like, that was just a rabbit hole I didn't want to go down because I'm not excited about that.
Right.
I know I need it. I could talk about that too.
Oh, what do you mean you're not excited about? Can't you tell us like the difference between 7 different types of foam and all that?
No, but that was the thing. That was the big one. Do I go cheap on the foam? You can buy foam for $10, or you can buy the Auralex, which I bought. I was like, is this stupid if I go cheap on this? So I know I sent you a picture a while ago, and I could send that to you too, of my little studio / room where my in-laws sleep. So my challenge is, this is my office. I work from home for my other business too, and I have this big bed in here. I'm like, bed's gotta go. Making a podcast studio. So, but I got a really cool Murphy bed. Not to pitch the Murphy beds, but if you're familiar with a Murphy bed, it's the one that like goes into a big cabinet in the wall.
Oh.
But there's this really cool one that just that has no cabinet around it. So I took it's a queen size mattress, folded it up against the wall. Now I can have my studio space, and I have a table with mics, and built into the table.
Nice.
But I need to cover it. I was like, in my mind, I was just going to kind of take a curtain and put it in front of it. And I realized, wait, if I do that, I can't lower it. I was like, maybe I'll just put some kind of platform or build, like a room divider thing in front of it. And I realized, wait, I need sound treatment. So this worked out great, and it was inexpensive, and I'm not a big handyman, but I was able to, Google it and YouTube video, figure out how to build a rectangle thing with wood.
Right.
So I took 1x3s. I built two big platforms, put them together with a hinge so it folds just like a room divider. I stuck burlap on both sides and got Roxul, which Roxul. Roxul, I think it's called Safe and Sound, which is insulation for your house, but people use it in studios.
Right.
So it's soundproofing. So I had this massive, big room divider looking thing right behind the mics that totally deadens it, and it's actually just hiding my Murphy bed. And the other side of my room, I have an opening that goes down steps. There's no doorway, and that was awful for reverberations. And anyone that wants to listen to the Drink, Drunk podcast, the first episode was at my kitchen table with whatever mics I had. Second episode, we moved upstairs, and I think maybe by the 5th episode, or maybe 6th or 7th, I revamped the studio and put all the sound treatment in. So I have these steps. So I built another same little kind of door-sized frame on wheel. So I roll it out and hook it to the door. And then I just got Auralex foam. I bought a big pack and covered my ceiling above where the mics are, and tried to hit the open spots on the walls where it's hitting. And I did research, but like I said, you can go on a rabbit hole, and I just wanted to get that done with as opposed to learn everything about sound treatment. But if you are doing this, and who knows if I'm doing right, but it does sound a lot better. One thing you could do is you take a mirror and you put it, where you think you're going to put the foam, and you see where the mic is in the mirror, because that's where the mic's bouncing off.
Nice.
And that's where you put the foam. So that was the only kind of advice that I heard that was like, I think I'm doing that right.
That is cool. Yeah, you're doing it right, man. There's no, look, you don't own a sound design business or whatever, but no, you did it right. Everything you've done is working, and it's great.
That sounds good.
And the fact that you put in all that work is just tremendous. Especially the room dividers, or what in the music studios, they'll call it like a gobo.
Yeah.
And those are cool because you could take that with you, right? If you move or something, you just bring it with you and
exactly
put it up wherever you go. That's very cool. All right. So when you went and talked about editing before, you mentioned Lipsmacks, and I also take out Lipsmacks typically, unless it's
I gave you a few to take out. So,
oh, I didn't hear him. But have you ever? This has happened to me sometimes. Sometimes the way someone pauses and takes a breath, it actually sounds. It makes more sense. It's more natural if you leave the Lipsmack in. Have you ever noticed that?
I just did that 2 days ago, where it was a subtle Lipsmack. I was like, oh, but it was enough, and I took it out, and it was I did it wrong. But yeah, about to breathe, and I took it out and put it right back. I was like, oh, that totally ruined that. It ruined it, because then if you take out the Lipsmack and the breath, you have that big dead space.
Yeah.
And that's where I can. This is the difference between waveform editing, and which would be cool if I had them all in. So if I had all three mics in a single waveform, I could cut it, and everybody moves.
Right.
And that's the benefit. So I can't ripple delete the Lipsmack the way I do it. I can only do the auto heal function and remove it, which is amazing on Audition. So I can't edit it out. If I did that, I would have to go into each track, or I would edit it in the multi-track. And editing in a multi-track is you have to highlight it, select it, delete it, and do that, and it's not as precise. Where in that waveform editing, it's it's just cut and paste kind of stuff.
Yeah,
so,
you can in the waveform editor, you can go down to like the millionth of a second kind of thing.
Exactly. So what I'll do at the very end of the mix down wave, if there's a Lipsmack or something in there I want to take out, and as long as no one else is talking, that's where I can go in, and that's fun. I mean, it's just fun to just X things out, cut them out,
right?
And it's really fast. So that's kind of the give and take between doing it all in waveform and doing it in multi-track, at least in Audition.
Right. So multi-track and Audition, why can't you get rid of the Lipsmack? Is it because you can't zoom in?
No, because
enough?
I have. You mean why can't I delete it out?
Yeah. Why can't you ripple delete it out?
It just takes longer because I'd have to highlight all three tracks I have. So that's what I do to take out sections. That's when I do the first round of content editing, where I take out the in between segments.
Right.
I highlight it, delete that, select it with the time selector, ripple delete, and then it's not as precise and it takes longer. To do one little Lipsmack would mean I have to get all the way in there, and it's easier to go in and beforehand. So I go into the waveform, auto heal it, save it, then go back. That makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
All right, so then after you get done with the first Audition file where you're chopping everything down into segments and getting rid of the in-between riff-raff stuff, you bring it into a second Audition file, and that already has all the music and the bumpers and everything loaded into it, right?
Yeah, and the effects.
Got it.
Already set up from the last one or whatever my template is. Yeah. So
nice.
I don't start from scratch on the processing.
Right, and then the processing you have are like effects chains that you have saved, like presets that you've saved that are applied to these different tracks.
Correct. And
then you go in. So what is in the like a standard effects chain that you already have preset?
Sure.
What's in the chain?
Yeah. So for at least for this, the way it works, so I have a bunch of Waves plugins, which are great. And a tip for those, I know people have brought them up before. I purchased the Silver Bundle, which I looked up before the show, is $600, but I got it for $150 on sale. So anyone that wants plugins, get on their email list, because they have sales every weekend. And it's easy to go, oh, it's only $39, I should buy it. But if just for podcasting, there's not that many to buy. There's a lot of music ones.
Right.
So that Wave Silver Bundle is fantastic. I also purchased the Vocal Writer, which is $250. I do not think it's worth it, but I got it for $49. And for $50, I think it is worth it. And I just changed it to do what you do, to try that out, where it's that 1 decibel above and 1 below.
Right.
So getting back to what you asked me, so I start with the C1 compressor, which is a Waves compressor, using the gate and the compressor. The gate doesn't really work for me. I've tried it, and it's great because especially when you have all these people talking in the same room, it cuts out the other microphone. But it wasn't worth the couple of times when you'd get that whatever that noise is when it comes back in if you don't catch it.
Yep.
So I use the expander on both of those, and I needed it a lot more before sound treating the room better and before getting the people podcasting to like really eat the microphone.
Right.
So as long as they're close, and I think you even gave me this advice too, is you try to set them up so they're counteracting each other in that null spot. So I don't need the expander as much. It's actually working a lot better, and I'm got the levels a lot better. So I start with that. Then I have a vocal rider. Then I put the L1 limiter, which is part of that Waves plugin. They have a great limiter. So I limit that. Then right now I'm using the parametric equalizer that comes with Audition, but I also sometimes use the Waves EQ, which are really, really good. Then I have a de-esser. Then I put another limiter on it just at like -2, just to make sure it doesn't clip. And then the loudness radar meter, which is on all of those, which tells you your loudness. And that's kind of what I have for most of them, but I'll change them depending on, what they sound like.
Right, so the last thing is the loudness meter.
Yeah, which doesn't affect the signal at all, but it's just at the end of the chain.
All right, this is good. So I do the same. I have effects chains all set up that I can just apply and then tweak. So each show, like, look, if you're recording the same people in the same studio with the same mic pre's and everything should be the same, then in theory, you should be able to just apply last week's effects chain to this week's track, and it should sound great. But we know that there are subtle differences. So when you're doing a new episode and you go in there and check the effects chain and the levels and you tweak stuff, how do you do that?
Yeah, so I'll just kind of go down the line. So the compressor is what I change. I'll definitely change that. Lately, so the limiters are kind of fine, seem to be okay, and just tweaking the EQ a little bit. And the best way I do with the EQ now, and I'm sure people brought this up on your show, especially if you don't know how to EQ anything, which I kind of didn't. Two things of advice I got are to bring the level really, really low, so that the input really low, and then you kind of sweep it. So you'll take the each frequency and put it all the way up, and kind of sweep across the range until you hear when it sounds bad. And that's one of those things you hear advice and people go, well, what sounds bad? How do I know? Kind of thing. So I've been doing that, but now not at that low level, although I tried that. So now I was like, okay, I take it. I have it kind of already set. So I'll take the frequency and I go, oh, that hurts my ear. And I go, oh, maybe that's what they mean when they say it doesn't sound bad. So you take that and then you do the inverse. So then I'll come and I'll bring it down, the gain for that frequency, and just cut it a little bit.
Right.
And that seems to be good. It's getting better. My problem now, and if you listen to the later episodes, is just some of it's still too harsh on some of the vocals, and there's a certain point like, okay, I'm going to stop doing this because it sounds fine. So that's my biggest thing now, is just trying to get better. And maybe if there was somebody out there that would have this, I don't know, like a podcast school for engineering that was available, I don't know, maybe I would give that person money, but one doesn't exist yet.
Well, to restate what you said about how to find the frequencies, right? What you were saying is you narrow into a frequency and you boost the gain on that frequency, so it pronounces that frequency, and then you can change the frequency. So let's say you're listening to 2K, bring it up to 3K, bring it up to 4K, and you'll actually find out, like you said, what hurts and hurts your ears. And typically it is around 3 or 4K.
Yep. Hey, something helpful for people out there is just Google vocal EQ cheat sheet, which somebody told me to do, and I go, oh, and there's a whole bunch of just Google image, and you'll see a whole bunch of charts and cheat sheets, they're called, and it tells you this, like, which is also confusing, but it's a visual way to kind of wrap your head around it a little bit better.
Yeah, yep. So you boost the gain to find the frequency that's nasty, and then you don't just turn the gain back to zero, you actually go negative on the gain, so you actually remove some of that frequency that was harsh and hurt. And the other area to do that in is the low mid, right around 400.
Yeah.
That's in fact, for me, that's like usually the first frequency band I focus on or I hear.
Okay.
Because that's like muddy and bassy, and you can't mistake 400 or 350. You can't mistake that with, 120 or 200. because 120 and 200, you need those. Those are low frequencies. Those are warm. But the 400, the 350, the 440, those are all mud. Or can be mud. So
getting an understanding of what you just said helped me a lot. It made me feel more comfortable with other people, other voices, to just attack the EQ from the beginning. Okay, I know where to start. So I think I have a pretty good starting point to get it to where it sounds acceptable. It's just kind of those last few steps of making it sound professional is where it's challenging.
Right? Okay. So then the next thing you said you do is you bus the 3 voices or 4 voices, I think last week you had.
Yeah, depending on, so I'll bust that to a separate track.
And that's only for the purpose of a loudness meter?
Yeah, so the loudness meter also, I said I have a tiny bit of reverb, which I just started doing just because.
Yeah. Why did you start putting reverb on there?
It's almost imperceptible, but it sounded better.
Got it.
I mean, literally, it's the tiniest bit. And I was like, okay, I could hear a difference, but it just makes it sound a little better.
Sure.
And that's kind of new. I do have an EQ on there. Sometimes I'll put one of the waves EQs on there to get that extra bit. If there is harshness or something that I was like, it just doesn't sound right, but everyone sounds kind of bad. I've been able to, I think, fix a little bit of stuff. So there's EQ on there. And then I have looking at it right now, I have a limiter on there, which may or may not be necessary.
Okay.
Just with the lowering the ceiling.
Okay. So when you talk about harshness, I want to ask you about the harshness, because there's a harshness around 3 or 4 kilohertz.
That harsh. Yeah.
Okay, that's the one. Because then you have like between, let's say, 6 and 8 kilohertz, which is the S range, where you would normally use a de-esser.
Yeah, which I'm using on the individual tracks.
But if that frequency is too pronounced, that can also seem harsh, but it's a different harshness than 3 or 4K. Then above that, you have 10 to 12K and above, and that's more like, the sheen. That doesn't really hurt your ear. If you turn it up too loud, it does hurt your ear, but that's really not harsh. It's more like just that really crystal clear clarity, the air, right? It's been described as air. So, all right, so you're saying it's between 3 and 4K. You can actually turn a de-esser down to 3 or 4K if you want to try that. That'd be one way to do it. So if it is harsh at 3 or 4K, then don't set your de-esser at 6 or 8K. Set it down 3, 4K.
Yeah, good point.
Because then when the 3 or 4K goes up too high, the de-esser will squash it down and it won't be so harsh. And I would also, one thing I do about when I use my effects chains, so I have my effects chains that I saved, and actually I save effects chains for each speaker, right? I'm sure you do too, right?
Yeah.
Each different speaker has their own effects chain, own presets, which it takes us a while to come up with that preset, but then once we have it, we use it. Then when you do a new episode, you need to go through and tweak it like you were just telling me. The compressor is really the first thing I check to see how much it's getting squashed, because that'll really tell you if the input volume is much, much different. If you see it's getting just squashed like crazy, then you'll know that the track maybe was recorded louder for some reason, and you can turn down the input a little. I also always check the de-esser just to see how much the de-esser is kicking in as well. And of course, when I'm looking at the meter of how much the de-esser is kicking in, I'll also use my ears to see if it's being squashed too much. The other thing I look at is the vocal rider, and I make sure with the vocal rider, that's like one of the most telltale things to look at for me, because that's like the level. I'll know if my vocal rider is if the fader's going real low, is trying to pull it down, then I'll know that it's a little too loud. So I can actually adjust the level so that the vocal rider is, sometimes pushing it up, sometimes pushing it down. It's sort of...
So, you're kind of using that as a meter almost? So you'll go back and adjust the little level in the compressor? Is that what you mean?
The output of the compressor I'll adjust. Because the
compressor going into the vocal rider.
Going into the vocal rider.
Makes sense.
So if the vocal rider's trying to pull everything down because it's too loud, I'll go back to the compressor, turn the output down a little, a hair, not probably 1 dB, maybe. And then you go back to the vocal rider and you look and you see where it is. And on the other side, if the vocal rider's pushing everything up and it's never pulling it down, then you know that the level's not loud enough. So then you go to your or you go to something earlier in the chain, turn up the output so it feeds more to the vocal rider, and then so it's almost, I almost use it as a meter. That's an interesting way to put it.
Yeah, it's interesting. Cool.
Yeah. All right, so then you break it down into or you save it as a mono MP3.
Correct.
So do you use any mastering plugins or any multi-band compression? See, you're doing a lot of limiting along the way, which is good. So you might not need a limiter.
I have. The only thing I have on, I do throw a limiter on the master channel, a hard limiter, and that's it. I don't think I need the multi-band compression at the end, but how would I do that differently, and why would I need that?
So multi-band compression is really good for it, when there's a bunch of different voices or sounds. It'll compress different frequency bands differently. So and I don't know, same as always. It's like the low end. The low end is always well, all the frequencies are important, but the low end for some reason it plays a big role, because if there's too much low end, it sounds muddy. If there's not enough low end, it sounds thin. So getting that right. So let's say one of the voices has more low end, and let's say one in the episode they at one point get a little louder. So there might be a lot of low end in the final mix, and it might almost, sound like too much low end. So a multi-band compressor it'll let the mid-range and the high end go through untouched, but that low end, if the low end gets too loud, it'll squash down the low end a little bit.
On the master channel?
Yeah.
I guess I could put that on that bus track too, right? Since everything else is just music?
Yeah. Well, you can actually put a multi-band compressor anywhere you want. You can use a multi-band compressor on every voice in every effects chain. The other thing is, when you mix the voices with the music, that's another reason to use a multi-band compressor at the very end, even on the music. Because the music, sometimes the music has a lot of low end. It's too much compared to the voices.
Yeah.
So, that's sort of a mixing thing. You got to get that mix right, because once it's mixed together, it'll take down the low end for everything. But yeah, you just got to play with it. Like, sometimes it makes sense, sometimes it doesn't. I typically... Well, here's another reason for a multi-band compressor, is not everyone talks directly into the microphone all the time.
Good
so
point.
Some people are going to turn their head, and depending on how you speak into the mic, that affects the frequencies that are picked up. So especially if you're closer, it picks up more bass. That's the proximity effect. If you're a little further away, it won't pick up as much bass. It'll sound thinner. If you speak directly in, it'll pick up more presence. But if you speak at 90 degrees, I just turned to 90 degrees right now, you probably can't hear much difference. But it'll pick up less presence. So people's microphone technique changes the different frequencies all the time. So a multi-band compressor is good in that sense, because if ever there's a big dynamic range in one of those frequency bands, it'll even it out.
Just the mic technique, you're right. My show has gotten much better since mic technique has improved from the two ladies who never been in front of a microphone before.
Right.
Now they know, like, when they laugh, they tilt their head back, and they know to stay in front of the mic. Pretty much that, a good mic and sound treatment. I almost don't even need to do any of the processing. It still sounds better than most podcasts, I think. But that's been the most helpful.
Definitely. So, question about Vocal Rider. And by the way, if you're listening to this and you don't know what Vocal Rider is, it's a plugin which is basically a fader which automatically rides the level. You set a target level. And for some reason, I always set my target level is always at -17. I don't know, what is yours at? What do you pick? I forget. I don't know why I picked that, but when I first originally set up the level,
it depends. It depends where what the yellow bar is doing. You keep it set the same for everyone?
I do, because then I know that the output, because the Vocal Rider I use as the last part of the effects chain. It's like the very end. So I always want each vocal track to be about the same level, because then my music track will stay at the same level.
Okay.
So I always keep my target level on Vocal Rider the same. So then that's how I can use it as a meter as well, right? You can look at it.
Yeah,
So-
that makes sense. Yeah, because the Vocal Rider's, it's simple, but it's kind of tricky.
Sure.
That's helpful.
Yeah, so if you pick a certain output level, and you probably already have it, right? You do
Yeah.
have presets already. So, but if you make each voice the same, so all those 3 voices, put the target level in Vocal Rider at the same level.
Yeah,
And then-
I don't have mine at the end of the chain though, but I'll try that.
Yeah. So right, there's different philosophies there. You don't have to have it at the end of the chain. I mean, some people might even put it before a compressor. I mean, that, you could do that. I mean, look, Brian Orr was on the show. He has, like, I have my fader range is like 2 dB, right? Maybe 1 dB above 0 and 1 dB below 0. He has it like, what did he say? Like +6 and -6 or even more.
Yeah, when I started, I was doing +6 and then -12 on the low end, which was
There you go.
something. I read that somewhere in the manual or something that's so that it's. But I don't know. I don't know how effective it was. I'm still tackling the Vocal Rider.
Yeah.
Definitely don't spend $250 on it. But if you can get it for on sale, I think it's worth trying to figure out.
Totally, $49. I know I got mine for $49. I would never spend $250 on any plugin. I don't know. I see these now they have these plugins like the LA2A and the 1176. I mean, these are classic compressors. I mean, these are like some of the best compressors in the world. And even they're like $150 or I don't even know how much they are. But I don't know. I don't want to buy it. I don't know.
Well, so do you have a loudness meter with Reaper?
I actually don't use any loudness meters, no.
But you're kind of using the Vocal Rider in a way as one.
Well, what I do is I do similar to you. I use Reaper for all my multi-track stuff, and then I bounce it down to a stereo wave file, and I open it up in SoundForge Pro. SoundForge Pro is like, I love that thing. It's just a little stereo editor. I can do the precise editing. I mean, I love it. And in that, I even in there, I don't have a loudness meter. What I do is I use the average RMS of the final track.
The loudness meter has helped me immensely now that I know it, and it's native with Audition, which is why I'm using it for this. And speaking of expensive plugins, the TC Electronics one that comes with it is a couple $100. I do my other show all in Pro Tools, and the worst part about that is there's no loudness meter because I'm used to it. Now I'm doing all different voices and interviews and music and everything.
Right.
And I can't spend a few $100 on something I kind of already have for free. So on that show I put it together in there, but I'm also using Audition to do the vocals first, just to try and get it like I know because I'm more familiar with it now. But
right.
Yeah,
well,
Pro Tools, that's a whole other beast.
But then why are you using Pro Tools at all?
Good question. So I started trying to do it on Audition. Also, I'm doing music in it too. So Audition doesn't have you can't do virtual instruments on it. It's strictly audio editing.
Got it.
So I needed a DAW that could do that. And back in my day when I went to music school and was composing music, I first had an Atari 1040 ST, if you remember those, which I bought used back then, which was the first computer for music. It was the first computer to have a MIDI input on it, which is kind of cool. So I had one of those. I would write music in my dorm room. But then I had Logic. So I was looking at, should I get Logic? And so that was one of the reasons why I needed something else. And I tried all of them. I tried Reaper, I tried Hindenburg, and then I said, okay, let me try it in Audition. But Audition is great for the audio editing, but it's not that great for moving things around. It was just, it's not that precise. And I said, let me try Pro Tools. And I did. And it was such a world of difference for being able to get really, really precise with where you're putting clips and of your audio.
Right.
The problem though is once you go on that trap, I mean, I love Audition. I just put it in a computer. Now I have the iLock, and same with the Waves plugins. Once you get those, you need they're licensed to a certain computer.
Right.
So if anyone's familiar, iLock is like a USB drive, but it's not a drive. It just stores credentials.
Right.
So if you don't have that plugged in, Pro Tools won't work. Right. So you'll see people they hold those things, if they lose that, they're screwed.
Right.
So now I'm tied to one computer. I had to buy a new computer for Pro Tools because it wasn't, fast enough. And now I have additional hard drives because you can't have it all in one. So I record to one hard drive. The other hard drive has my library of sounds, and then my computer has the application. Right. So I'm in this whole mess of it's pro equipment, but man, so now I'm going down the rabbit hole of spending money, and it still crashes all the time, and everyone hates it. But I figured that's the standard, So if I do work with other people, which I'm going to hire people soon for other shows, to use that, it is awesome, but it is It's a bear to use and pay for.
Right. Wow. But it shouldn't crash. I wonder why it's crashing.
It's not. I mean, all different reasons. I've been on every message board about it crashing for stupid things. I mean, you have to always mess around with the buffer size. It doesn't play nice with it. Actually, I went through a huge ordeal. I bought a new Mac for it, and it doesn't. It's not compatible with the most recent Mac software. So, and I bought. I was like, hey, can I roll it back? And the Apple's like, yeah, I get it, and I can't. I spent more time trying to figure out how to just keep it from crashing, actually using it. But for creating, my other show is more narrative, creating narrative story, radio, audio. It really is better, and I can record MIDI music on it too, which I use for the sound design.
Yeah. And so you tried Hindenburg. What was your feeling about that?
Hindenburg was awesome for one very specific thing, is that it hooks up to Skype. And I tried a few other things, as we were talking earlier, to record interviews. And Skype went through a bunch of updates, and it's been pretty good for me. But there's an awesome thing in Hindenburg where it connects directly to Skype. Huh. So, and I know I did it. I tried it on their trial version. It worked flawlessly. It brings both in, and it records on both tracks for you right into the DAW. So you hang up, and it's already all there. Right. And Hindenburg has the other really popular thing where it does the loudness for you. So it's pretty much drag and drop. So I said, all right, I'm going all in on Hindenburg. This is when I was on demo trials of everything. So I already started going on the path on Pro Tools. And I took everything out of Pro Tools and I put it into Hindenburg. I put all my things together again. And then I got spoiled on Pro Tools because you can't get as granular in Hindenburg. Oh. So, you can get like really, really, really granular on fades and everything and cross fades.
Right.
And Hindenburg was really quick, and it's made for radio people, for news, journalists, and it's really good for that. But I got spoiled, like I said, on just being able to get real OCD in Pro Tools. So I said I scrapped that and I went back to Pro Tools. But Hindenburg is really cool for that Skype feature.
Yeah, that is interesting. Although Skype, everyone knows I'm not the biggest fan of Skype. I like Skype, but for recording, it's, yeah.
Oh, I will say how I record Skype, though, which I took from a video Ray Ortega did, who was on a recent show.
Yes,
right now I'm talking into the Audio Technica ATR 1200 USB because I had everything set up, my better equipment, and of course it didn't work when I called into Chris. So luckily I had this as a backup. And one of the things, like, hey, for $50, let me try this. Everyone talks about it. I don't really like it. But it has this unique feature on it that Ray has a great video about, where the USB goes in the computer, and it can work at the same time as the XLR. So it has a USB and an XLR output. So I put the XLR right into the Zoom. And it records both tracks, and I have the computer output going into the Zoom, and I'm able to record on two tracks. It is in right and left, so it's kind of annoying. So my voice is in one ear, the interviewee's voice is in the other. But it's a really quick, easy way to record Skype. So check that out if anyone. That's using a cheap mic and a fairly inexpensive recorder.
Right, that's pretty cool. Yeah, that mic. I've never owned one of those mics. I might get one at some point, because they are handy. Guys, right, when the price goes down to like $39, some people buy like 6 or 8 of them.
Yeah. It's handy to quickly plug it into a computer to do something like this, to record online, because it has the headphone out too. So it's pretty concise. And it sounds okay, I guess.
Yeah, no, it sounds really good. Well, for the money, it sounds really good. It's definitely, the more money you spend on a mic, typically it'll sound a little better. Not always, but as a rule of thumb. But for the money, that thing is nice. And especially for, like you said, and like we know, that for people who don't know anything, it's a great one just to plug in and talk. And it's a very high baseline quality for sure.
The other mic I have from my mics I've had are the SM58, which I'll use. So I only have 3 SM7Bs. So when I had 4 people in the room, the last show I was on this mic, the ATR 1200, but previously I had the SM58, and that's an old one. I mean, they're pretty diehard, but I was like, I sound terrible on this, and I know people don't like them, and I wouldn't recommend using that. And I think I did sound a lot better using this mic, just XLR, instead of that one.
Yeah,
and it's cheaper.
Yeah, the 58's a good mic. Look, it's a workhorse. It's been, in live music, the vocal mic is usually a 58, but it's a little bit dull. I mean,
it's a
little bit dull. I've mentioned before that when I wanted to buy some handheld mics for my studio back when I had my podcast studio in New Jersey a few years ago, I went to the music store with my digital audio recorder, and I was like, hey, I want to try a bunch of mics. So I went in one room and I took a 58, I took a few other mics, and I took a Sennheiser E835, and I just talked into all of them and right there, and then listened back with my headphones, and the 58 was just a little dull, which, by the way, dull meaning, not too much high end, but guess what? For live sound, that's pretty good, because the high end is what causes the feedback. So it's actually better for live sound. But the E835 was Sennheiser, way more present and a higher output levels, because as podcasters, when we're dealing with not the highest end equipment, the output level of mics is, it's important, because if your mic has a very weak output level, you need a preamp to crank it up. And then if you're using a cheap preamp as well, it's just noisy and not good. So
I have one other mic that I'll talk about. I have the Audio-Technica AT875R, which is their mini shotgun mic. Which in the beginning I used that, and it sounded great on one of the vocals, but this I'll use for field interviews. So if anyone needs to interview someone, this worked great. I mean, it's a short shotgun, but it still is good. I got a pistol grip to go with it, and you can plug this right into something like the Zoom H4n that I have, and that works really good. So that's kind of my field mic if I have to do interviews out.
Nice. What model again?
The AT875R. So it's made for SLR cameras. So it hooks onto a hot shoe on the camera, which is why it's a short one. It's cheaper too. I think it was like $170 or something, compared to if you had a longer shotgun mic, they're over maybe like $250. So I kind of wish I wish I got a better one, because I bought this originally just to try in the podcasting studio, and that's when I had one person on this mic, one person on the other, and that's where I was running into the non-matching mic issues. Like, this one sounded great actually on the one woman's voice in the show, but it was picking up. What happened was I was picking up the other mic, and then the processing, which I wasn't that good at back then, I was processing the bleed, and that was my biggest issue.
Yes. Yeah, and it's a condenser, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's a shotgun condenser, yeah. Right. But it's that pointed, it picks up that pointed pattern, but it still picks stuff up.
Right. Yeah, certainly. Condensers are sensitive. So this has been awesome, Brian. Brian Adoff, owner of Riveting FM. You should go to the website, right? Brian thinks it's clean. I think it's clean.
It's very clean design, riveting.fm. There's not much on it. There's the one show, but I will have other stuff soon. My other show launches in a couple of weeks, and that's... we can get into this all, but a podcast I produced for a very large company, which allowed me to buy all the stuff I talked about, because otherwise I wouldn't have the money for it. I mean, it was all dedicated to the business, so that's a good way to buy stuff, is to get someone to pay to do a podcast for them. So that's gonna be called Unlocked. It's a B2B podcast. We're kind of the riveting. Our thing is doing B2B branded podcasts, which I don't think people have done yet, which is the world I come from. So I don't know. B2B companies have a lot of money. So.
There you go. So Riveting FM
to make a podcast.
Unlocked. It's called Unlocked.
Unlocked. Yeah, it's geared towards higher ed IT directors buying physical security. So not of interest to many people, but it's it's interesting, since this is a $8 billion global door lock manufacturer who's biggest in the world, and it's cool that they're using a podcast to, help their marketing and sales efforts. So that's pretty neat, and that's kind of a first.
That is cool.
See how it goes.
And you produce a show that your wife and friend host called Drink, Drank, Drunk. Everyone check that out. I'm not a drinker, but that sounds like a fun show. And there's grammar involved.
Well, it's a show about grammar, how people talk and communicate. We've stirred lots of controversies, especially for those people out there that do double space after periods. You will be lambasted if you listen to the show. Yeah, that caused a lot of uproar about that. But kind of like grammar rules, how to write stuff, how people write emails. It's also the drink. There's a lot of alcohol, a lot of feminism. It's rather explicit. We tend to offend a lot of people, but if you're interested if you're a word nerd in any way, definitely check it out.
That's cool. Well, I will say, Brian, thank you for coming on the show, and I really want to congratulate you. Within about a year's time, you went from not knowing how to do any podcasting or audio, basically, and you've really put in a lot of time and effort, and you put your heart into it, and I can hear it, and I can feel it, that you really have come such a long way. So I definitely want to congratulate you on that.
Well, thanks, Chris, and thanks for your show. I mean, this is one of the things that helped me.
Yeah, and I often forget to say that to our guests that aren't audio engineers. I mean, really, if you're listening to this and you're learning things, doing things, trying things, look, it's awesome what you're doing. Keep going, and you're picking up skills that you don't even know. So thank you, Brian Adoff. Thank you for listening, and we'll be back with another show next week. And until then,
so impactful over music.
I have a little time.
I'm not going to let you miss your cue.
Barry?
Yeah, oh yeah.
That's it. Sound great!
Walk away from me well, and you can't play that part so well. Why do you play it out on me now? You like to lose control well. It's quite a feeling, isn't it? Let them float and risk it down now. You tell me that you found something better. How should I respond to that? It's a lie. I don't wanna hear it. What do you want me to say? It's a lie. I don't wanna hear it. You react some empathy. You change your attitude where you say I just don't get it now. You say your eyes so far away now. Gave up on me where some chance you gave me gave away. You say I wouldn't understand now. You tell me that you found something better. How should I respond to that? Oh yeah, I say now it's a lie. I don't wanna hear it. What do you want me to say? It's a lie. I don't wanna hear it. You react so angry. I want you to know you were everywhere sweet. So I gone over all we've been through. Doesn't seem that long a time now. Things we did still hold that meaning. And does it mean it's still the same? You're pushing me away. You worked your theory